Welcome back to TV Tangents, a classic TV podcast. Today on the program, we gush about the 1970s detective series Columbo. Grab a can of Tab and a spot on the Davenport because the show's about to start. All right. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Rebecca. Sorry, taking a
Welcome
drink
to
of
the
my
show.
beverage.
That's fine.
Hi.
You're going to think I'm really stupid,
Never.
but I didn't know that Columbo started in 1968.
I didn't even really know Columbo existed until we
Really?
were told to do this podcast.
Your mom didn't watch it?
My mom did not watch it.
All right. Well, this was a listener suggestion that we pulled out of our mug. I was recently watching SNL's Weekend Update, and Columbo was described as having resting cigar face.
Resting cigar face. That's an interesting one. I like that.
Because apparently Columbo is like everybody, all the
big
kids
deal?
know who Columbo is.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
I didn't either. I was watching the show in my living room, and my son came in, and he said, "Are you watching Columbo?" And then I was like, I now have to find out why a 17-year-old. Do I never know my kids' ages?
I was just going to say at this point, I don't know how old any of them are.
Okay, same. So please welcome our second guest ever, my son, Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Yay. Applause. Adam, welcome to TV Tangents.
Hi.
We wanted to bring in what is your generation called? Gen Z?
I guess. I
Okay.
don't really
We wanted to bring in a Gen Z or a hip cat to tell us why the kids know about Columbo.
I don't know if this is every kid. This is just mostly my circle, but there's this voice actor named Gianni Matrigano. I'm probably butchering that name, but he does very good impressions of a lot of characters, including Columbo. Yeah, he's a very good voice actor. I really like him. But yeah.
Well, when we had some Columbo on earlier, and you walked into the room, and we're like, that voice actor really does a good Columbo.
Yeah.
So it must be
He
good.
does.
So we were watching Columbo a little bit when we were having dinner or before dinner, and what did you think about Columbo?
I didn't really have any thoughts on him, but I just remember the voice was really good. Like, Gianni Matrigano's voice was very close.
That's awesome.
Like, a little bit more rough, I guess, but that's about the only difference I can think of.
But also there are a lot of memes floating around about Columbo, is that correct? Because you know memes, you're always talking about
Yeah,
memes.
Gianni Matrigano does memes. It's very interesting.
You'll have to find some good memes of Columbo so we can put them on our social media pages.
Yes.
Yeah, I will, definitely.
Send them to us.
One of them has, a single swear word in it, but I don't know if you're...
Natalie's
Find
heard
that.
swear words
I've
before.
heard some swear words
Okay,
before.
well...
We try to be family friendly, but
Yeah.
sometimes
The
it
show is
spills over.
definitely family friendly.
Yeah.
What else do you have to say about Columbo for your generation as the spokesperson for your generation, Adam?
I don't really. It's just he's a very good... I like him as a character a lot, but I haven't seen any of the actual episodes or any of that. I just wanted to share that he is in modern thought, I guess.
Culture. Yeah. That's good to know because I wouldn't even... I mean, I don't know a lot about modern culture like that your generation would even talk about. So, but the fact that I didn't even know who Columbo was until I started watching this. So that's very interesting.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show,
Yes.
Adam.
Yep.
We appreciate you being our guest.
Thanks for
Adam.
joining us.
Yep.
He's more than just a bartender. I think he was our bartender once too.
That's right.
You were.
That's
one
your
time.
new catchphrase, Adam.
You just
He's
had to
more
bring
than
some
just a
bottle
bartender. So yeah,
I love that the kids know the Columbo. That's awesome.
yeah. Apparently, he's like, he like the whole '70s vibe and the whole like aesthetic is hip with the kids.
Mm-hmm. That's
I don't
awesome.
know.
That's
I don't
awesome.
know
I
what
love
the kids
it.
do.
I
It just
love it.
really surprised me when he knew who that was.
Yeah. I like in today, yeah, he just walked in. He's like, oh, yeah, I knew that was Columbo. I was like, oh, interesting.
That is awesome.
Yes.
You had never seen Columbo.
I had never seen Columbo.
I had seen Columbo because my mom watched it because she watched like all the detective shows. I never sat down and watched an episode, so I didn't really have a concept of what this show was because I was thinking more Murder, She Wrote.
Right, me too.
Like we have to find out who the killer is.
Yes.
And I also thought it only happened in the 80s.
I had no idea. And even when I started watching it, I kind of looked it up. I was like, oh, this is an old 70s detective show. Okay. And then I didn't realize it went on for like 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. And there were times where it just wasn't on or whatever. And it was very interesting. So I just thought, and of course I watched a lot of the beginning. So it's very 70s vibe. And all the different, stars that make it appearances. But yeah, it was so good. And the first thing I did, I always kind of like look at the very beginning description on the Wikipedia, and it said how it was set apart because you know from the beginning basically who commits a crime, and then you just have to figure out how Columbo's going to figure it out.
And that threw me.
Me too. I was like, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. I watched the very first episode, the very first one, and I was hooked. I was like, this is kind of amazing.
Yes. I was hooked. Number one, the scenery was amazing. Like, this is like a tour of 1960s Los Angeles.
Yes.
It's amazing. And then I hadn't read the description, so I didn't realize that we know who the killer is because I'm watching it and it's like, this person killed this person. I was like, wait a minute.
Wait, the show's over.
Right. Like, now what? And also, Columbo doesn't come in to the first pilot episode until about 32 minutes, 26 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Is when he comes in.
Interesting.
This was a 2-hour pilot episode, which was another thing that threw me. I was like, I've been sitting here watching this show for an hour and it's not even done.
Yeah.
And they filmed 2-hour pilot episodes.
Each episode seemed to be about an hour and a half. Most of the ones I watched were about an hour and a half. That's why, too, in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, it's how many seasons? And I thought this was going to be like, again, it was an hour-long show that was on TV or something along those lines. And then every season was only like 8 episodes because each one, they described it as almost being like a little mini movie each episode.
And when you add in commercials, you come out to an even 2 hours.
Right.
Some seasons, a couple of seasons were like 4 episodes or 3 episodes. So that was different.
Yeah.
They were kind of sporadic in the 80s. So the first episode starts with like a far out James Bond Rorschach test kind of thing, which me being the person who thought I was about to watch an 80s or 70s cop show, I was like, wait. Where are we? Yeah. What's happening? This is amazing. And then they're at a mod party, and I loved it.
Yes. Yeah, that very first episode was great. And then once I saw that was the concept, it's such a cool show. I've never had a show be like that where, I mean, every once in a while you see things and you kind of know something that happened and if someone's going to get caught or whatever. But every single one being like that, I was like, wow, this is super intriguing. And it's so funny to me how all the murderers are so indignant. And they're just like, and then at the very, like, we'll kind of get into that a little bit more, but it's just so funny to watch how each person thinks they're going to get it. And, in the beginning, I didn't realize it was LA, like I probably did, but I'm like, hasn't everybody heard about Detective Columbo by now and how you can't get anything past him? Especially since there was like a police commissioner guy that committed murder in an episode. And I was like, haven't you talked to Lieutenant Columbo before? Because he's a genius.
Don't you know you're gonna get caught?
I was like, I don't understand.
But that's just it. He's very unsuspecting because he's not from their world.
That's true.
They're all these murderers are rich people.
Yes.
And famous people.
And he has the oldest car that doesn't work and the door doesn't open. He bumbles around and he does a really good job playing ignorant. He really like ropes them in to, I didn't even think of that. Yeah. You're right. Like he gets them to say something as if they're the one who just like solved part of something for him. Oh, I did. And they're like, you're welcome, Lieutenant. And they're all just like, they get so lulled into a false sense of, security
because
that they're not going to get
what
caught.
Does he know? And there's the one, it was in the 80s, I think it was called like Columbo Goes to College or something like that, where he's a guest speaker at a college class about criminology or whatever, and the murderers are in his class.
Oh.
And then he's hanging out. All these college students think he's like the coolest thing. And they're like, all chummy with him. So they ask him to go to the bar afterwards. So he's hanging out with the killers. And he's walking around trying to solve the murder with all these students, including the killers. And he keeps saying stuff like that where he's like, oh, you guys are right. Because the killers are like, well, maybe it's this. And he's like, oh, you're probably right. But he already knows because he already like recognized the name of the guy on the reservation about,
It's
so
crazy.
it's the process that's cool.
The little things he discovers. I just can't. The most random things he can figure out the connections.
Sometimes it's a stretch. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't think you had that information, Columbo, but it's fine.
Yeah, and he kind of talks people into something where, well, he tricks a lot of people into revealing themselves because he'll be like, oh, this happened. And then the killer's like, picks up something that they couldn't have possibly known. Like there was one with a camera and the killer picks up the perfect camera and there's like 10 other cameras sitting there. Well, you know that because they said, oh, the film was destroyed, and he picks up the one and he's like, how did you know that was the camera that would have the negative in it? And I'm just like, oh, bum, bum, bum.
Dun, dun, dun.
And it's just, it's very interesting. But I do have to say, I've been dying to say this to you.
Oh,
I
geez.
texted you one night and I've been dying to say to you, did you see the episode where Dr. Spock tries to set up Dusty from Dallas
I
for
sure
murder?
did. I sure did. I sure did. Let me get to my notes.
Okay.
Let me
that
get
was
to my
so
notes.
good.
Because, yes, Leonard Nimoy, Dr. Spock, with regular people ears,
Yes.
which you don't see very often,
No.
is a murderous surgeon who's experimenting on animals also. So
Yes.
sad. And then the nurse is Anne Francis, who starred in Forbidden Planet. Oh, 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 oh. Leslie Nielsen is also in that movie. Anyway, that's a tangent. I digress.
Interesting.
Anne Francis is the nurse, and then Dusty, like you said, works at the zoo. And he's a prescription drug addict, which I thought explains his dustiness with Sue Ellen in Dallas.
Oh.
Because of all the drugs.
Truth. Very truth.
I love in that episode that Columbo and his wife had like a rough night for some reason. I don't remember why. And he's looking for coffee through the whole thing. And he can't find any coffee. And then somebody hands him a bottle of orange juice that has like 4 ounces of orange juice in the bottom. They're like in the parking garage. And yeah, he's like, oh, okay, I guess that'll do.
Yeah. He's like hilarious because we're talking about how he stumbles around and just acts crazy. And then like at the beginning of season 2 or 3, he started carrying around hard-boiled eggs as a snack, like in his pocket. And he's constantly like cracking them on things.
On
and
people's
then
car.
peeling
He
them.
went up to like a car and just...
Yeah.
And
He's like,
then...
excuse me, I haven't had anything to eat.
This guy comes over and they're talking about, or they're looking at the body or whatever, which is funny because Columbo doesn't like the sight of blood. And he had cracked the egg on somebody's car, and they're looking at the body, and this other cop is standing there, and he hands him his shells. He's like, would you mind getting rid of those? And this cop is like, okay. He's
Thanks.
always eating.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, he was like all about chili, and that kind of went away. It seemed like it was going to be a recurring theme that he went to a restaurant. They're like, "What's it going to be today? Chili." And he was like, "Well, what did you? I saw a special, da 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 da," and then he orders chili. So I was like, "Okay, that's his thing. He orders
The one
chili.
where the chef murders the other chef or whatever, or murders somebody.
Yes,
That one, everybody in that episode is offering him all kinds of like gourmet exotic foods, and he's just like, yes please, and he's walking through the kitchen just eating everything, and I loved that.
Yeah, he eats caviar at one point, and yeah.
Lieutenant Columbo is a homicide detective with the Los Angeles Police Department, and the 2 pilot episodes aired in 1968 and 1971. The regular series originally aired on NBC from 1971 to 78. And then the initial run ended in 78. because Peter Falk and the network were unable to agree on budgets and some budget talk.
Yeah.
And then it returned on ABC from 89 to 2003.
I saw that. I was like, what?
That's insane.
That is insane.
That's like, in my mind, like 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not.
Not 20 years ago. I saw that and I was like, I was watching episodes over the last few weeks, and then today I finally discovered I could watch some of the later ones on Tubi. I was like, oh man, I should have been doing this, but I was like so engrossed in the early ones. Mm-hmm. So today I started watching an episode from 89, and I'm like, okay, now we've changed totally. It's got the dramatic, and the best part is the very first one I pull up, I'm going to watch it, and it had Deidre Hall in it, who plays Marlena on Days of Our Lives, and I was like, yes.
Yes, it was a different vibe. It was a different vibe than before, but it kind of has to be. And I would call that a reboot. Mm-hmm. Like, if we were talking about it today, it would be a reboot. That's what they did. They rebooted the show, and they were like, let's bring him back, but let's just do 3 episodes.
And he was, like, exactly the same, though. Had the same car.
And he doesn't carry a gun.
He doesn't even like guns. Says he hates guns, and paid another police officer to take a shooting test for him. He had some other cops show up, and he was like, hey, here's, just take my badge and go. And they're like, I don't think you're supposed to do that. And he got all mad because he didn't want to, he even had to shoot a gun to test fire. They were going to see where it landed or whatever. And he didn't even want to do that. And I was like, this is the most bizarre. And yet everybody kind of like he shows up and they're like, oh, excuse me, Lieutenant, you know, like whatever. And then they're just like talking to him. And I'm like, God, this is so weird. He's hilarious.
He's also afraid of water. I love that there's small talk all the time. Like, he just walks up on a crime scene, starts talking about, like, he's like, oh, that's, like, a nice pool table, and I used to play pool, like, with my brother, and blah, and just some random stuff, and he just, and then they're like, okay, can we get back to the murder? He's like, oh, yeah. But I feel like sometimes he does that to draw stuff out of people, and other times it's just because he's, like, you know, he was just going about his day, and then he got called into this murder, and he's like, oh.
He's like, oh, I guess I'll be there. But yeah, it's almost like everything's calculated except he pretends to be just a bumbling guy. And it's funny because he shows up, or there's been so many times where his dog is in the episode and same thing. His like dog's in the car at one point and he's barking and he's like up at the person's door going, oh, just be quiet. Just, you know, da-da-da-da-da. Then he takes him to like a pier. And again, he's always like coming up on the murderer. And just being like, oh, excuse me, ma'am. I just wanted to have a conversation, you know, about whatever. Oh, no, I'd like to bring my dog down here. And we you know, just like to look at the water. And he picks up his dog that's like a giant hound with like the droopy face. And he's all like chubby. And he picks him up and he's staring at the water. And he goes, yeah, looking out at the water really like peps him up. And the dog like lays back and falls asleep on him. And I was dying. I'm like, oh my God. He goes, he's had enough. And he just, I mean, it's so funny. If you met him, you'd just be like, this guy is out of control.
He is hilarious.
He's so funny.
Do you know what his first name is?
No.
Nobody ever says his first name, but his badge does say Frank Columbo.
Okay. Because just today I was watching one, and the guy was like, what was your name? And he's like, Columbo, sir, Lieutenant Columbo. And I'm like, is that his first name or his last name? He's Bobby. Well, like, I was literally like, I don't know what his name is.
Trivial Pursuit, you know, the game Trivial Pursuit, apparently got into a legal battle with the creators of Columbo because they had a trivia question, what was his first name, and they just put Philip.
They just made it up.
They just made it up, and the creators were like, that's not what it is.
Right.
It's Frank. And then Trivial Pursuit people were like, well, I mean, we didn't really do anything wrong. So they won their lawsuit. So.
Oh my God.
It was weird.
Very
it was a
weird.
Whole weird thing. Peter Falk provided the wardrobe for Columbo.
Oh, really?
This was his basic like raincoat and his big shoes. He drives an old Peugeot 403, which is a French car that was manufactured in the 50s and 60s. And it starts out okay, but it gets progressively rustier and... It's a tiny little car. He looks ridiculous in it.
Right. He had to take a guy who does driving tests, who he was also questioning because it ended up leading to figuring out who did a murder. he gets the guy to get in his car and he can't get the door open. So he's inside, he's like shoving on it, and then he gets in there and he drives crazy. So this guy's like having a heart attack, and I was just like, oh my God. And that car is just a beater. It's hilarious. And he gets into a couple accidents that I saw with another cruiser.
Yeah, I'm
it
sure.
happened at least twice. I was like, okay, this is interesting.
And nobody cares.
And then he just gets out like, I'm okay. And he just starts going about his solving business. I'm like, okay.
So he always wears the same duster raincoat style thing, but there is one where his wife bought him a new raincoat. Did you see that one?
I don't think so.
And it was really nice. It was like brown with contrast stitching, and it was like fitted, and he had it buttoned, and he hated it. And he kept, like, in the beginning, he's like, oh, my wife bought me this coat and whatever. He kept trying to lose it and, like, leave it places. But people kept bringing it back to him. And, like, he left a crime scene. And they were like, oh, Lieutenant Columbo, you forgot your raincoat. And he's like,
oh, dang it.
Eventually, he did lose it, though.
That's awesome.
The character of Columbo was created for a short story titled May I Come In by the writing team of Richard Levinson and William Link. And Columbo first appeared portrayed by actor Bert Freed in the 1960 episode of the television anthology series The Chevy Mystery Show titled Enough Rope. But Columbo was an old man. He was like 70 or something. And that story was then adapted into a stage play in 1961 and featured Agnes Moorehead and Dora from Bewitched as the victim of murder.
Interesting.
And then in 1968, it was readapted again into a 2-hour TV movie, which was not really intended to be a series, and they approached Bing Crosby to play the detective, but he turned it down. He was like older at the time. He was like in his 70s or something, because that was their intention. And Peter Falk, when he started, was like mid-50s.
Yeah.
And they thought he was too young to play the role, but he was like, no. He really wanted it. And then in 1979, there was a spin-off called Mrs. Columbo. Did you know about that?
I read about it, but I didn't see anything about it. I didn't look into it because they said she never appeared on the whole show.
Right. He talked about his wife every
all the
episode.
time and talked to her on the phone and everything.
Which I think it's better that we never see her, because every time he mentions her, I just have to think, like, how can I imagine a person who would put up with someone like Columbo?
Yes.
Because he's so set in his ways and surly and accident prone for some reason.
He said he was going to come to some dinner party on one of the episodes, and she was going to come. And then, of course, I was like, then he shows up, and then she's like, where's your wife? And he's like, oh, she wasn't feeling good.
Well, Mrs. Columbo is played by Kate Mulgrew in the series in 1979.
Really?
You know who she is?
I do.
She
played most recently Orange is the New Black, but she's been on Dallas and Star Trek. And
she was Captain Catherine Janeway on Star Trek Voyager, and she was Red on Orange is the New Black, and she was in a couple episodes of Dallas. And Mrs. Columbo in the series is a crime-solving newspaper reporter, and we never see her husband.
Interesting.
Yeah. But it was canceled after 13 episodes. This was after Columbo, the original series, had ended.
Okay.
A year after. So they were just like, oh, how can we do it without Columbo?
Very, very interesting. I do like in the beginning, I thought this was going to be more of a thing that early on in multiple episodes, somebody would say something and he'd say, well, what do you know about that? And that's very George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. So I was just like, oh my God, that's so funny. And then just, was it today or yesterday? I was like finishing up some episodes, and Columbo shows up to somewhere and goes, oh, does anybody know where Miss whatever is? And this guy goes, search me, we're on lunch break. And I was like, God, I have to keep saying search me more often. Search me.
You know what I used today? And how.
And how.
Before we talk about all the bajillions of guest stars, should we talk about the cast?
Yes. It's like Peter Falk, right?
Yeah, that's it.
That's the cast.
Peter Michael Falk was born September 16th, 1927 in the Bronx, New York. And his parents were Jewish immigrants. This is where I went down a rabbit hole for maybe an hour. And you'll know why. Peter's right eye was removed when he was just 3 years old due to retinoblastoma.
Blastoma.
Okay.
Isn't that what the name
Yes,
of
it
it
is.
is? The
Yes,
only
it
reason
is.
I know that is because of how many people on soap operas have had
really?
retinoblastoma,
Which is funny because
including Johnny DeMira on Days of Our Lives.
it's actually rare.
Is it?
It's a congenital. It's like an uncommon cancer of the retina, and it's congenital or genetic. It's a mutation.
Interesting.
And I could go on about it. It's like sometimes, you've seen stories on the internet where somebody saw something in a picture of a kid where they see like a white light and the other eye is red. That's a retinoblastoma. But it's not very common.
Got it.
And so it's very treatable if you catch it. But this was in the 20s.
Sure.
So he ended up having his eye removed, which is usually what you do. In 1953, he got a degree in Master of Public Administration from the Maxwell School of Syracuse University. And that's basically just training to be like a civil servant.
Really? Interesting.
In the federal government. And in his memoir, Just One More Thing, he said he had absolutely no interest in any kind of civil service. But that's what he ended up doing. He was a management analyst with the Connecticut State Budget Bureau. And while he was there, he joined a community theater and eventually quit his job because they told him he was a great actor. He moved to Greenwich Village in 1956.
Interesting.
Wonder if he was a beatnik.
Yeah, I bet he was.
That sounds very beatnik-y.
I was going to say.
His breakout film role was the 1960 film Murder, Inc. Not Murder, Inc. That's what I read when I saw it. Murder, Inc. In 1961, he was the first actor to be nominated for an Oscar and an Emmy in the same year.
Oh, wow.
Those were for Murder, Inc. and for a guest role on the series The Law and Mr. Jones. And in his lifetime, he won 4 Emmys and a Golden Globe. He was married twice and had 2 children. His second wife, Shira Denise, was 21 years his junior, and she appeared in more Columbo episodes than any other actress.
Really?
Do you know who she was?
I don't think I do.
I remember seeing her name in the credits, and I thought, Shira, like Princess of Power? Shira,
Princess of Power.
I love Shira.
Me too.
So in a couple episodes, she was the blonde. She was in Murder Under Glass.
I'll have to look that up just so I know what she looks like, because that's interesting.
She also did the song for the episode Murder of a Rock Star or something like that. Something to do with a rock star, where there was like a singer and she got killed and whatever. The song that was sung for that was by Columbo's wife. They met in...
Not Columbo's wife.
Peter Falk's wife. It doesn't matter. They're the same person. They're literally the same person.
They are the same
In
person.
fact, people have said they're the same person,
Yes.
like people who know him. They did not meet on the set of Columbo, but they did start dating. He got divorced. They got married. She was in the show all the time.
Interesting.
She was also in the 1983 movie Risky Business. When Peter Falk passed away in 2011 from complications of Alzheimer's and pneumonia, there was an issue with his wife.
Oh.
He was 83, which would have made her in her 60s or whatever. And his daughter, Catherine, from his first marriage, alleged that Shira prevented his family from seeing him at the end of his life and didn't notify them of his condition or of his death.
Wow.
And this resulted in the passage of Peter Falk's law in at least 15 states, which provides guidelines for guardians of incapacitated people regarding visitation rights and notice of death.
Interesting.
That is crazy.
Yeah, that seems to be a prevalent theme, and especially with actors or,
It seems to
famous
happen.
people.
Yeah, like something similar happened with, is it Casey Kasem?
Kasem?
Yeah.
And have you just recently in the news with John Amos?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
John Amos.
Yeah. He's like, all of a sudden I saw something and then it said it's like his daughter thought, now I can't remember, the daughter was abusing him or something.
Yeah.
And he looks like he's getting...
Is John Amos still alive?
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
He's one of the... I think we talked about that when we talked about Mary Tyler Moore, how he was one of the last few, like, that is still around. So I was like...
Crazy.
But there were pictures online of, he's definitely not doing well, so...
Well, anyway, that's the story of Peter Falk,
Interesting.
who apparently is just like Columbo, as people like to
I
say.
could see that. I could totally see that.
And always late for everything. They were always, in all these articles I was reading talking about he was always late for everything all the time. And I can totally see that.
I could too, because he looks just like he would be if he acts like Columbo. Then that would make sense.
And he brought his own wardrobe. He was like, I'm just going to show up and I'm going to be me and you tell me what to say.
Yes.
Yeah. That's funny.
So interesting. He's so unassuming. It just, He's, great actor because he really does play like so well. Such a bumbling, guy who's just like, do, and then he's just somehow he's like a genius.
Like
how did he know that?
Like his outside voice is like, dumb and unassuming, and he's always confused. He's always like talking like he's confused, but his inside voice is figuring out this murder.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really weird.
Like to the point I just love the one he made subliminal photos in a reel to get a guy to run back to where like the murder weapon was. I was like, that is some crazy stuff right there. I mean, the way he can figure things out, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
He's so observant. He's always observing things, even though you don't know it.
And other
he's like,
people.
wait a minute, didn't you say earlier this? And they're like, did I? I don't even remember.
And they're like, oh, yes, Lieutenant, I forgot. You're right. Blah, blah, blah. And then they always have another reason. And then he's like, oh, that's what I figured.
Oh, yeah.
But then he's also just remembering everything and keeping those mental receipts.
If
He's
you're
like,
talking to Columbo and he does that and he goes, oh, that's right. You're done. You are
done.
cooked. He has caught you.
And so many of them, they were so, just cocky that they weren't going to get caught. And they get so indignant with him. Columbo, if you don't have anything else, you need to leave me alone. And then I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. Like, da-da-da-da-da. And then on and on and on. And then at the very end, for almost everyone, there's like this huge realization. And then all of a sudden, everyone's just like, they either confess or they're like, well, a couple ladies were like, may I take your arm, Lieutenant, so they can go off to prison. And I just am like, everyone gets so resigned. No one fights it. No one's like, nope, you don't. Like, I'm getting a lawyer. Nope, I don't care what you say. Whatever the thing that happens at the very end, they're like, he got me.
Like, well, wah wah. My 2 hours is over.
Exactly.
In the one I was talking about, Columbo Goes to College in season 10, that features Robert Culp, a.k.a. Bill Maxwell from Greatest American Hero. It was actually in a couple episodes. And
he wrote his name down and forgot who he was.
Yes.
So, yes.
Yes. He is the father of one of the murderers who's like a douchey college student. And he's like a lawyer. So he's like threatening Columbo's job and everything. And he, like you said, he's one of those like just entitled. He's like, don't you understand that like there's nothing you can do to us anyway? A woman in that episode refers to Columbo as a rumpled little dumbbell. And I took offense to it.
Aww.
I was like, don't call. At that point, I had seen 10 seasons of Columbo. I was like, don't call him that.
Don't call him
that. That is rude.
That's just mean.
He's our friend Columbo.
Exactly. Oh, poor Columbo.
Poor Columbo.
And he has such a process where he comes around, he's always looking at stuff, and other, detectives and other people are missing things, and he's got stuff figured out, and just how, at one point he knew there'd be like poison ivy on the slide of a microscope. I'm like, how?
How do you know Columbo?
Right. He's like supreme genius.
He's a supreme genius. And we don't have time to mention every guest star that was in this show. I do have a list, not a full list. We have Marsha Wallace, who was Carol, the secretary on the Bob Newhart show. We have a lot of people showing up from a lot of familiar shows, like the Bob Newhart show. Because Suzanne Plachette, I just watched her today, who was Bob's wife on the Bob Newhart show. She is in an episode where she watches, like she accidentally sees Eddie Albert from Green Acres shoots somebody. And we have Leslie Nielsen a couple times. Pat Morita, who played Mr. Miyagi.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Bernard Fox, who is Dr. Bombay from Bewitched. And also Twigglytop and Middlebottom from the Monkees.
Monty Landis, speaking of the Monkees.
Monty Landis, yes. David White, who played that creep Larry Tate on Bewitched. William Shatner.
William Shatner.
Plays very much himself.
Yes. That was a funny episode. At first I was like, is that William Shatner? And then I'm like, oh, that's
He's
William Shatner.
so young.
He is. And it's just, his hair is different. At first I literally didn't know it was him.
He's an actor in that episode. George Hamilton.
As soon as I saw George Hamilton, I was like, oh, George Hamilton.
George Hamilton, who we did not chase around a hotel in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Because he wasn't there. It was just someone who did not look like him.
But looked like him, who we called George
Hamilton. A little bit
Hamilton.
looked like him.
Yes.
We're like, let's just follow him just to see what happens.
Yes.
That didn't happen.
No. And in that episode, Leslie Ann Warren is in that episode also. And she's so, like, as soon as I saw her, I have never seen her that young in anything. Because she's, like, on Will and Grace and a couple other things. And she's always playing a woman who goes, like, and she just plays, like, a, whatever. But I'm like, she was really good in that episode.
Julie Newmar was on an episode.
I didn't see a Julie Newmar episode.
She is so statuesque.
She is statuesque.
George Wendt from Cheers.
Yep.
Everyone from Dallas. Not everyone. A few people from Dallas.
Yeah. Susan Howard, for sure, from Dallas. And did you see Valerie Harper in an episode?
I did not see Valerie
Harper. And
Dean
Stockwell from, who he came in super quick. I didn't even know that was him until I was like,
he's another one that's so young and so out of place because we weren't expecting it. Yeah. Timothy Carey. You don't know the name, but he played Lord High and Low in the Monkees movie Head. Oh, remember Lord High and Low is the one who said, "Don't never, but never make fun of no cripple." That's Timothy Carey, and he was in 2 episodes.
Oh, okay.
And I was so weird because he's not a person that anybody knows. I was just watching and I was like, that is that guy.
Familiar.
We had Ray Milland, Vincent Price,
yep.
That was a fabulous episode.
Really was. And who else was in that? That was, Martin Sheen's in that episode.
Martin Sheen is in that episode, yeah. That was the one that I was talking to you about that I was like, what are they doing with their faces? I didn't understand.
That one was really, that was really good too. Same thing, like all that. I think that might be the poison ivy microscope one. Yeah, that is.
That's like another one of those where you feel like they maybe crafted these episodes around their locations. Yeah. Like, where can we film this episode and what story can we make out of these cool places? Because they had like a fashion show and all these fabulous California homes.
And I don't know what it is too. You're right. It must be the era, and we're kind of obsessed with that era. But like, did you see the episode with Janet Leigh?
I didn't see it.
So she's, she's a past her prime. Well, she was like a dancer and an actress, and she sits in her house and watches her old movies. And it was very interesting, and I'm watching it. So she ends up killing her husband because he was like, you can't go back to that. She thinks that she's going to go back to being a star, and she's like older. Kills him, does this whole spiel where like she climbs down the tree and like then switches the reel out so the butler doesn't know she was gone, whole spiel. And at the very end, of course Columbo figures this out and is talking to her, the guy who also was kind of in love with her and he's been like an agent or something along those lines. And at the end it's revealed like that the husband knew she had some kind of like inoperable thing in her brain, so she doesn't even remember that she killed him. Oh. So Columbo's there, and then the boyfriend is like, no, what Columbo's coming to tell you is I killed him. And she was like, what? Why would you do that? And then she sits down and watches her movie some more. And there was like I was like, so they're just gonna let her, because is she gonna die? Like, there was like no kind of resolution to like she wasn't gonna get arrested.
sad.
And it was and that was weird to me because she was just that actress. And then that just reminded me of kind of like the, A Star Is Born kind of theme where they're like past their prime and they don't.
Yeah.
And I was like, that episode just like really got to me. I was like, this is so interesting.
I should watch that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to stop watching Columbo.
I don't think I'm going to
finish
either,
all of them.
Yeah.
And I will watch. I already have watched the pilot episode 3 times.
Oh my gosh. That one is so good. Yeah.
It is so
good. And I
good.
just like, there's so many of them.
And when I was watching yesterday, I know you didn't watch a lot of the 80s ones, but what is the name of the guy in Dallas that I hate that has the square head and he came out of nowhere and he's now dating Lucy or he was dating Lucy, but he was also kind of dating April.
Oh yeah.
And also
so his name is,
I don't know the actor's name.
I don't know the actor.
Casey Denault.
Denault, yeah.
Casey Denault is in a similar episode in the 80s where he is dating this famous author who, okay, they said this famous author is old. She's like in her 50s. And she looks like she could be 40 maybe. And I'm like, she's really pretty. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm not buying this. But anyway, he's like dating her, but it's all a ruse because he murders her. And he's just trying to get her money or something. Yeah. I don't know. Because he's also like living with this other rich lady. So, but as soon as I saw him, I was like, no.
No, can't have this. Well, that's what there was the other one about the author who she wrote a book called like, Yesterday I Was Murdered or something, and she ends up locking some guy in her safe, and that's how she kills him. And Columbo figures out the story by, like, at the very end, the guy scratched an arrow into some boxes that were stacked. And then they find a note in the light fixture. And it's her book, and it says he scratches out the one part. It says, I was murdered by what's her name, you know. And then she just resigns to it. Like, that's just full proof that and I'm like, oh my God, some of these.
First of all, that's what I'm going to do if I'm ever kidnapped, is just scratch things and, like, clues and stuff.
Yeah.
But also, there's been an influx in the last few years of authors murdering people in real life. I just have to say. And, like, it's not good for us.
No.
Another author episode early on starred Jack Cassidy.
Who's in multiple episodes.
He's in multiple episodes. Yeah. He's the father of David and Sean Cassidy, who this is really weird. The week I started watching Columbo, I had never seen a single thing with Jack Cassidy in it.
Me neither.
But I was watching some other 70s show with Jack Cassidy in it. I don't remember what it was. And then this came up, and I'm like, all of a sudden, Jack Cassidy is in my life.
It's everywhere.
Like, we're acquaintances. Like, not friends, but like coworkers who you used to work with but don't anymore. That's how I feel about Jack Cassidy. I'm like, why are you always here?
Yeah.
But that episode where, like, he is a co-author with another author, but the other author does all the work, and then he, like, lures him out to his cabin and kills him, and then he's like, I am absolutely getting away with all of this. I'm like, dude, Jack Cassidy is kind of an interesting character.
He is. I like when he's the great Santini.
Yes.
And apparently he used to be a Nazi, and that's why he has to kill someone. I was like, this is so weird.
That was very clever. How he had, like, the tape and the microphone, and he's like, guy, come here. I want to tell you a story from the other side of this door so that I have an alibi.
Exactly.
But, like, I also was thinking, does every detective series have a magician episode? Because Simon did this, and I feel like Murder, She Wrote did this.
Yep.
But that's not Columbo's fault because this was the 60s or 70s or whatever, so they probably did it first.
They were that early on.
There's also a very young Anthony Alda, who is the half-brother of Alan Alda.
Really?
And I didn't know who he was before I saw the season 7 episode Murder Under Glass, which is like a favorite episode in the Columbo fan world.
I watched that one.
But I was looking at him, I was like, who is this guy who looks really familiar? He wasn't familiar. He just happens to be Alan Alda's brother.
Interesting.
Columbo is investigating the death of a chef, so that's the one where, like, the chefs keep making food for him, and I would be eating everything. I would love to just hang out with chefs all day so they could make me food.
Yes. Well, Although you don't really want to hang out with chefs. We'll get into that later.
I actually do know that. I do understand that fully.
Side note.
I do.
My week.
It's fine.
Anyway.
We all have our things,
Yes.
don't we?
I did have to mention, too, that how Johnny Cash is in an episode.
That's right, yeah.
And he's, like, awesome, too. And it's just, like, and he's the same. And first of all, Johnny Cash has the best voice of all time. And just him, my man Columbo, and he just, with his voice, I'm just like, same thing. Thinks he's gotten away with something and just, like, boom.
They all do. I think Columbo gives them this sense of, oh, this is never going to be solved. Mm-hmm. This dude has no idea what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, oh, I got nothing. I don't know. You're probably innocent. And then he walks out the door and then he comes back and he's like, just one more thing. I got to ask you.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot, sir. Just one more thing. I was going to ask you. And then it's like some trip up question where they're like, what does he know? And my favorite, though, is when he tricks them to going back to the scene of a crime. And that's how he got Johnny Cash, too. He went back to find, like, the parachute.
Right.
And it's just like and then all of a sudden he turns the headlights on his beater car, which seem to be very bright. And then they're like, whoop. They're all deer in headlights, like, and then they're like, sometimes they're like, Lieutenant, what are you doing here? Like, they're not caught red-handed. And I'm like, oh my God, it's hilarious.
So fun. There are so many funny moments. And there's one where he's on a pier and he's talking to a guy up on a boat or something. Mm-hmm. And there's like a bunch of like noise from the ships and they're trying to yell at each other. And Peter Falk is actually breaking in this scene because he's laughing so hard because they're like, the guy's talking to him and he's like, what? And they're just like back and forth like that. And it is kind of hilarious. It's all hilarious.
It really is. This is just such a great show. Like
it's a heartwarming murder show.
It is. I know it's kind of like wrapped up in a nice little bow at the end, and it's just very like okay, kind of like. And we talked about Murder She Wrote, and that's very like at the end, it's almost like comical. Mm-hmm. And this makes more sense because he's an actual homicide detective. He's not just an author that just runs into murder all the time.
Yes.
But that's what's great is like just finding out the little things and. Just the little tricks and oh my God, there's so many. I can't even remember them all.
Yeah, I have to keep watching it because I didn't see all the episodes.
Yeah.
I saw all the seasons so I could get a feel.
Yeah,
but
I started skipping through a few so I could get through more, but yeah.
I don't want to stop. It's fun. Either. And, I have an affinity for the late 60s LA scene anyway, so it's like a comfort. Like I have it on when I'm working and it just feels like a warm blanket. Like, oh, there's a murder happening in a really nice house.
The murders are also, I did want to say, very
clean.
They don't show you a lot, and sometimes people just like you never actually see anyone like getting shot usually. Like there's you see the murderer. Mm-hmm. And they never show you what actually happens to the victim. Or sometimes there's like these weird, like, especially if it's a woman hitting somebody, it's just all like, ah! And then like that you just see her like doing something and then the person is on the ground. Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, they killed him.
No.
And there's a couple times where it could easily be self-defense, but they turn it into like a murder.
Yeah.
Because they hide it. And I was like, you could have played that off. There was the one where, actually, I think it's the one with George Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And he's going after his wife, the guy that ends up, and he hits him and he dies.
Yeah.
You could have been like, I walked in, he was beating her. I hit him over the head. The end.
Yeah.
Could have got away with it. And instead he kills two people because he killed that girl too. Made her dive off the high board. And that's George Hamilton, evil. He hypnotized that girl to kill herself.
George Hamilton was acting. He was acting.
I know.
He was.
We have to start separating people from
we
there.
Can't.
We can't.
We really can't.
Columbo, we can't for sure. But yes, it's like that creepy guy we always talk about that shows up in random episodes from the episode of Different Strokes.
Yeah,
who can never be anybody but that guy.
Yeah.
So
who we would have punched in the face had we seen him in public.
Yes.
And that's bad. That's bad.
That is very bad. Although maybe they take that as a compliment that they're such a good actor.
You're so good at this.
It's so like, incredibly creepy, Mr. that you just have to be punched in the face. So.
It would be a compliment to Peter Falk if you saw him and you were like, hey, this murder just happened. Can you come over and solve it? And he'd be like, no, I'm just an actor. And you're like,
Lieutenant.
Oh, you're so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're
Excuse
not.
me, Lieutenant Falk. It's like, no, I'm actually an actor. It's fine. He did try to get into the military, but because of his glass eye, he could not. So he was in some other branch of something. And it's all a lot of big words. I don't know.
A lot of big words.
I read stuff. I didn't write it all down.
Yeah. I hear ya.
What else do you have to say about Columbo? Like, do you have a favorite episode or a favorite guest star?
So many. That's just, that's way too hard. There were so many good ones. I mean, I think there were a few that I kind of was like, and there were a few I think I even started and they weren't getting to the murder fast enough. So I was like, what's happening?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Some of them I started and I was like, I don't actually care how they caught this. But so many of them sucked me in. Like, one of my favorites was when the guy he strangled his wife, and then he had already planned it out with his mistress, and like she had to go to the airport dressed as his wife, and then she had an argument with him on the plane.
Yes.
So they had witnesses.
Oh my God, yes.
That was genius.
They planned that whole thing. Yeah, that was
genius.
Great. So, and was even like, when you get back, the laundry will be out. Be sure to put that, planning that down to the, yes. And so many people that are like, okay, so I'm going to steal some jewelry and then I'm going to take this wherever and then there were so many that I was like, that's really like,
smart.
Wow, this murderer, because it seemed like some of them just did it on the fly. Well, some of them did. I mean, some people, it was like a heat of the moment kind of thing. And then they figured it out, how they were going to cover it up.
Yeah.
But
there was a lot of premeditated. A lot.
A ton. It was like, oh, this is what you do to me. All right. Well, we'll see what happens about that. So.
Crazy.
Crazy.
Good show.
Indeed.
Well, you got anything else?
I don't got anything else.
If you don't know, because it's been a while since we've been around, you can now call us on the phone and leave us a voice message. If you want to talk to us about Columbo, tell us what your favorite episode is, anything we missed or got wrong about Columbo, please call us and leave a voice message. We won't call you back. We won't answer the phone, but our number is 531-600-8024, and that number will also be in our show notes.
Yes. Leave us a message and tell us all about your experience with Columbo.
Columbo, because I know people love Columbo.
We found
and now
out.
we
Even
do
the
too.
Youngsters, yes.
Yes. Just know that any voice message that you leave may be aired on our show. You can also contact us via email at tvtangents@gmail.com. And there are some ways you can support TV Tangents. The first is to tell all your friends that you listen to our show. If there's an episode or something you heard on the show that's interesting to you, then tell your friends about it. You can also support us by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/tvtangents. And we have a lot of bonus episodes there and swag for some levels. Our lowest level is $2 a month. You get all the episodes that we've put on there. And you also get new episodes early. And for one-time support, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/tvtangents. And I put all this information in the show notes.
And we'd love for you to be on the social medias with us. I get on the Facebook page a lot just because I'm more of a Facebook person because I'm old. And the TV Tangents fan group is great. And we have a bunch of people who post on there a lot. And we always have like celebrity unfortunately, sometimes deaths, but like birthdays and fun stuff. We're just posting about Rebecca's favorite Dallas character the other day because Mitch, Lee McCluskey, had a birthday. And
which, again, we can't separate.
Right. And if you listen to the show, you know that we don't really like Mitch on Dallas. But I'm sure Lee McCluskey is a very, very nice guy. I'm sure.
Perfectly nice man,
so
I'm sure.
So once again, great actor because we hate him as Mitch.
We cannot stand him.
But just fun stuff like that. We like to post things. Somebody posted the other day about like a Mrs. Roper, like they have
pub crawl?
a pub crawl, yes, and we're doing that.
Do that.
We're gonna do that here. We should just have a pub crawl. We should just have a TV Tangents pub crawl.
We should. Come as your favorite sitcom.
Noted.
Let's do it.
We're gonna do it.
Your favorite sitcom.
Let's do it. We'll get a party bus. We'll do it upright. And then we'll all be in bed by 8 because we're all so
right?
old. So.
We'll do this at 6 o'clock.
I know. I was going to say, can we have a party bus at 1 p.m.? Is that weird? Okay.
Show up to empty bars, which is fine because we're all old and we'd rather be in an empty bar
exactly.
anyway.
I mean, maybe we start early and go to coffee shops. I mean, I'm good with that too. Let's do it.
Coffee shop crawl.
Coffee shop crawl.
Imagine all these coffee shops and people just start showing up in weird costumes.
They'd be like, what is happening? Oh my goodness.
Why is this person dressed like Steve Urkel in the middle of the day?
That'd be amazing. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Well, I don't have anything else to say about Columbo.
Me neither.
I don't have one more thing.
Oh, I don't have one more thing. One more thing, sir.
So we can wrap it up.
I have a great show, so that's the one
Okay.
more thing. Yes, and I love chili, apparently.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.